Neil, end of the season, really good first season for yourself, but obviously taking it back to the beginning of the season, it was a pretty chaotic way that you came into the club. Just what can you tell us about how things worked around in terms of you joining the club?
Yeah, look, it's been a whirlwind sort of 8-9 months or whatever it's been. Obviously last season I think had such a great season with Flint. 18 months of a body of work there where you go into a club that's at the bottom of the league and then you move them over sort of 14-15 months into second after 22 games, finished fifth, ended up sort of what would have been the playoff final and losing it in the last minute of extra time. So kind of felt like we'd built the foundations to kick on there and try and push for European football, and the football club had different ideas about where they wanted to take it with the 3G pitch, and then maybe wanted to put the ambitions on the back burner a little bit, but that wasn't quite what I was looking for, because you'll have seen it yourself, Nick, in the last sort of 8-9 months here. If I'm managing your football club, I'm giving it 7 days a week, 17 hours a day, and 11 and a half months of the year. So it was really important I took a bit of time out, fresh challenge, recharged the batteries, and looking at what the next move was. I was really lucky actually that sometimes you think, is the phone going to ring? It did ring a couple of times, but it had to be the right move. And I'd spoken to a club actually in England the day of getting the call here, and Dave Noman phoned me out of the blue on an evening. I took the call, and by the morning it was done. I didn't need any convincing, because obviously it's a fantastic football club. Really lucky to have a great owner that I already knew of in terms of Gary Dewhurst, and then obviously the co-owner now, Darren Pritchard, working with him. So fantastic opportunity to come in and work for a football club with some really good backing from good owners, some fantastic people around the football club that I knew from my time here as an assistant manager, mainly in terms of the people that make the club what it is, which is John and Roma and the stewards and all the volunteers that we've got here. And I knew the good people that were around the football club. And then obviously the staff, I was very fortunate that I knew was coming into Jake Hatton, obviously I'd worked with before, Neil Ebrell, who I'd worked with before, and people like yourself, Nick. So on and off the pitch, there'd be people here that I'd really, really look forward to coming to work with. And of course still have good players that I'd seen firsthand working with Andy Morrison, what those players were capable of delivering. So it was a really easy sort of conversation with the family and saying, let's get going with this, and it didn't need any convincing. And by the morning, a second phone call, third phone call, and then I'd taken the job.
Obviously your first game of the season was only 48 hours after you'd been appointed, with none other than TNS and obviously our outgoing manager Craig Harrison. Just what sort of a challenge did that lead you into in your first game of the season?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, you can't write it sometimes in football, can you? The quirks of fate really, and how events unfolded. And obviously Craig going into TNS and myself coming in here, and I think the important thing was I spent sort of 4 hours with Jay, looking at the squad that we had really, and looking what we had to work with. I think it's fair to say, through no fault of anyone that's gone before me, only focus firmly on what happens when I come through the door, but it's fair to say that it'd been a disjointed pre-season in terms of results, performances, players getting game time, injuries, etc, etc. So we had 11/12 fit players for that first game 48 hours later against TNS, who couldn't beat anyone convincingly on their day. They'd come fresh out of a European challenge where things hadn't quite got over the line for them. So it was going to be a tough task. The first thing we had to do was, do I take the job, or do I go, in terms of take the game, stand on the sidelines, or do I shy away in the stand for a couple of days? But that's not what I'm about. I wanted to get out on the pitch early. I wanted to try and implement some of the ideas and the things that I wanted to do into the players. So we got to work on a game plan that night, on the Thursday night, one training session, and then all the credit then goes into the buy-in from the staff that were here, that I walked into, and the players to implement that, because in a 48-hour turnaround for the players to go and draw a game over 90 minutes with TNS, who'd just been in Europe, and then win on penalties, shows the character that I knew I was coming in to work with, and the players and staff took all the credit for that.
Whilst it was an excellent start, obviously, beating TNS in the League Cup, case being brought back down to earth the week after in the first league game, losing 2-0 away at Cardiff Met. Just what can you say about what that meant to you?
Well, do you know what? It was, in some ways, it was circumstances made it the perfect storm, really. But actually, in hindsight, reflecting, looking back, could have been one of the best things that happened to us, really, because yes, we got a result against TNS in 48 hours later, but potentially it could have papered over a few cracks that we knew was existing within the group. In terms of how pre-season had gone, ultimately there was, over double figures of players had left the squad from the year before, through the summer or during the course of the season. Some big characters and big names, Jay Owen, Ollie Byrne, Byron Harrison, Craig Curran, Jamie Mullin, the list goes on, really. So there was a lot of players that had left the squad. Paulo Mendes was in the squad last season, wasn't here, in the summer because things were still ongoing with his contract. Chris Holmes was injured. There was and Neil Erdley had moved on, so there was a lot of turbulence going around. We were trying to build a new group with new players, so we knew that would take time to establish what I was about. New players getting used to a new club and a new environment, and me trying to stamp my mark on the group of what I wanted and how I wanted to move the club forward. So all those things mean they take time. It's about setting up the foundations and building the processes that work. And in the short term, there might be some bad days, and in the long term, you reap the rewards for the work that you put in. So really, really heavily relying, I knew I was going to be in the first couple of months on the core group of players we had. George Oran, Mike Wilde, Danny Holmes, Aaron Edwards, John Disney, Callum Morris. Those 6 had been there, seen it and done it. So it was important that they led it, and I could trust those sort of lieutenants, if you like, within the changing room and on the pitch. And in terms of that first game, I think what it highlighted for us is what we probably knew, is we had a mismatch or a mix-up, really, of new players who were used to one style of football. Players who've been existing in a different way of playing previously at the football club, and it all culminated with a red hot sunny day in Cardiff, where the travel arrangements were already taking place before I came in, where we travelled down on the day, got there 35 minutes before kick-off, and really we were, the score line of 2-0 didn't flatter Cardiff Met at all. They had full value for it. So ultimately, it gave us a stark, sort of warning of what was to come and the hard work that needed to be done. I remember speaking to you, Nick, after the game, and being quite candid with you about it. But I took responsibility for it because the players had only worked with me for 8 days. I'd asked them to probably do things that they weren't ready to do at that moment in time. So it was about getting back to the training ground and working hard on that. But also, this is where the owners really kicked in, because I spoke to Gary and Darren on the Monday, and spoke about what we could do better to try and enable those results not to happen. And fair play, they backed it with what I've always done, which is stay overnight in very good relationship with the Village Hotel. We've got a pre-match routine that I've had at Prestatyn and Flint, and moved over now to Connah Quay. And since doing that, the 5 games in South Wales last season, 4 wins and a draw, and unbeaten in those 5 matches, which probably have played a large part in us finishing where we've done. So the only 2 defeats we've had in South Wales was that first game of the season, where we travelled on the day, and then the Haverfordwest debacle on a Tuesday night, where we had to travel in the day again. So ultimately, lessons to be learned from every defeat. That was a huge lessons to be learned, and obviously the owners backed it, and we've reaped the rewards from our overnight stays in South Wales this year.
So your first 6 weeks at the club, Neil, saw us drop points only at TNS and Aberystwyth, but you must have been made up with the way that the lads bounced back from that defeat at Aberystwyth, going on to record a club unbeaten record streak of 21 with 16 victories in that time. You must have been made up with that.
Yeah, like I sort of touched on in the earlier question, Nick, I think I'm fortunate enough, I've managed over 650 games now in football management, so those 16, 17 years of management sort of, I have a firm belief in how I want my teams to play. I have a firm belief in what culture I'm trying to create, and you try and implement the building blocks and lay the foundations for it to be successful. At times, would we have liked to have got better results in the first 6 games? Absolutely. Were we really disappointed again in the Aberystwyth defeat? Yes, we were, because we felt we turned a corner after beating Bala and Penabont, which were 2 excellent victories. But 6 games in, 3 wins, 3 defeats, probably was a mark of where we were at, where we were still showing glimpses of what we were capable of, but not actually showing the consistency. But then from there on in, all the credit again goes to the players and the staff, because it's okay me having a vision of how we want to play, what we want to do and everything like that, but it comes with hard work, dedication, time on the pitch, leaving time on the training pitch, leaving no stone unturned, and then the players and the staff are the ones who've got to go and implement that. So I'm really, really fortunate. Excellent group of staff and excellent group of players, and I think over the course of those 21 games, once you start to build the momentum of winning games of football, I think the first 10 we won, maybe you'd correct me on that, Nick, you would know better than me, but I think the first 10 games we won all of those 10 games, and I think there was about a point 2 or 3 games into that we went to Cardiff away and won 2-0, and it's a difficult place to go. Cardiff, they were won the playoff final last season, they were riding high towards the start of the season, and that's kind of, I remember speaking to the players after the game and saying I saw things in that game that made me feel that we were going to be all right this season. So that one's the one that sticks out massively. And then added to that was a couple of weeks later when we went to Pontypridd, and we won 5-0, we won convincingly, and the players executed the game plan to an absolute T, and I thought it was the best probably 75 minutes of a 90-minute game of football that I've seen from us up to that point, and it kind of showed me glimpses that we had the team where we wanted it to be, had the group of players where we wanted them to play, and they were understanding what we wanted from them. So fantastic to have that kind of record, because it's not about me, but it's about the group having that record and having responsibility for it, because been some fantastic managers at this club. Andy Morrison obviously is probably the standout one, but Mark McGregor and Alan Bigstaff, Craig Harrison over the period of time prior to me. So for our squad to do something like that, it's a big kudos to them.
Obviously it was a fantastic run, but it has to come to an end at some point, and obviously unfortunately that came in the Nathaniel MG Cup final, a penalty shootout defeat to Bala. Just how frustrating was that to miss out on your first piece of silverware for the club?
Yeah, no, look, again, really frustrating, really frustrating. I was extremely disappointed with our level of performance, if I'm honest. I thought first 45 minutes we were very good. We had a number of chances to get ourselves ahead in the game, and it was never about my first piece of silverware, because again it's not about that, but it would have been a nice acknowledgement for the run that the players had been on, and the new squad that we'd built with players that hadn't got over the line and were new to the club, likes of the Ben Nashes, the Callum Bratleys, the Harry Franklins, Ryan Harrington's, who's growing into playing a number of games, and Josh Williams, who'd obviously started to cement his place in the team. So it'd have been nice for players like that to get themselves over the line. We were disappointed in our performance in the second half, and once you don't play as well as we could have done, you leave yourself open to the lottery of penalties, and it can go either way. It started our run by beating TNS on penalties, and maybe the twist of fate, it ended our run by losing on penalties to Bala. And games in a one-off fashion can go either way on things like that, and what we try to do is learn from an experience. So we were honest with the group. We had honest conversations about the fact that we didn't feel that the standard we produced was good enough, and we had to ensure that over the course of the rest of the season we put that right, because we didn't want to not show up in another big moment and a big game, and of which there was going to be plenty in the top 6 after the split. So we had to learn from that and dust ourselves down and work hard and go again. But extremely disappointing not to retain the cup that this football club had last season. But ultimately we didn't think it was going to define our season in that one-off League Cup competition.
Maybe not equally as frustrating, but similarly frustrating was also obviously the Welsh Cup semi-final defeat against Bala. It looked like it was nailed on to go to penalties that time, and then we ended up losing that one in the final minutes. Again, just how frustrating was that?
Do you know what? It was a strange game, that one, because I would say it was equally frustrating, because ultimately it was a semi-final and we'd had a lot of tight games against Bala. The final was a tight affair, no goals in it. There was a lot of scrappy affairs, and we played each other a lot in a period there. And I think maybe with it being a semi-final, and playing each other as often as we had, it allowed itself to become an open game. I thought we were excellent. in possession. I thought we were excellent for large spells of that, and we looked really dangerous going forward, and we gave away so many uncharacteristic goals in that. But at 2-2 with a couple of minutes to go, I think a couple of decisions didn't quite go in our favour, but that's football, we never worry about that. And to lose out, with a minute and a half to spare, and what we really wanted to go as far as we could in the Welsh Cup, and we wish we were now preparing for a Welsh Cup final on the weekend. But so really disappointing in that, because it's a prestigious cup, but we wanted to be part of as long as we could. But I think we reflected on that. I remember saying to you after the game, Nick, that you like to think that over a period of time, if you do things the right way, we train twice a week, we're meticulous in our preparation, our staff and players work to the nth degree to implement what I'm asking for with the meticulous nature of our preparation and game plan. You like to think that over a period of time it brings you, in a one-off game it could go against you, but over a period of time it comes out on top. And it's not about us against another club or anything like that, but Bala beat us in the cup final and obviously beat us in the semi-final, but over the course of a season we finished 17 points ahead of Bala, so you'd like to think that by doing things the right way and getting the preparation right over the course of the season, it pays dividends and the players have reaped the rewards on that. So as disappointed as the two cup competitions are, our task was to get into Europe, and we've managed to do that.
In terms of phase 2 in the season, it's very often the team that loses least that ends up qualifying for Europe, and obviously to only lose one on the final day of the season, that probably says a lot in terms of what we achieved.
Absolutely, Nick. We were really, really certain that the top 6 last 10 games were going to define who finished in the European places, and we'd got ourselves in and around second place from about 7th or 8th, 9th game in, and we felt like we'd occupied it for a long time. We spoke a lot psychologically within the changing room. Part of kind of how I want to manage is I try and ensure that once the game plan's taken care of and we know how we're going to play in a certain game, we've worked it and trained it, that I get into the players with the psychology of how important each game is in terms of the context. And going into the last sort of 10 games in after the split, we wanted to try and create as much of a gap as we possibly could going into it to give ourselves a little bit of a buffer. But we knew that our head-to-heads against the teams were going to be the difference, and the reason we finished second is because against Penabont, who were an excellent team and really, really tough opposition all season, we picked up 8 points from a possible 12. Against Bala, we picked up 8 points from a possible 12. Against Newtown, we picked up 8 points from a possible 12. So all those 3 teams only took 2 points off us. And against Cardiff Met, we picked up 9 points from a possible 12. So that's the reason, and that's not by chance. That's because, I go on, but the meticulousness of our preparation, the hard work and dedication that goes into it means that the players are able to maximise the best of their ability in any given game, and we do never take anything for granted. So it's full reward really for our performances after the top 6, and we were disappointed as we to lose to TNS in the last game of the season, because if we'd have won that game we'd have been equal with them in terms of our head to head as well, whereas now they've had the upper hand on us. So that's the only team that's done it to us this season, and understandably so, because they've walked away with the league.
After we did eventually secure Europa Conference League football against Penabont, we held our end of the season awards, and for the staff point of view, you chose Josh Williams as the young player of the season. Obviously he's been our standout youth player. Just what can you say about Josh?
Well, Josh has done fantastic. First and foremost, all credit goes to him, but also all credit goes to Connah Nomads Academy. This isn't somebody we've picked up at 16. He's been at the football club for a considerably long time, and every coach within our academy that's had dealings with him should take full credit for the part that they've played in enabling Connah Nomads to have an academy player that's come through and is doing as well as he is in the first team. So that's first and foremost. And then obviously Josh is taking his opportunities. It's interesting really, Nick, because the first couple of weeks that I came into the club, I sat down in this office with Josh and his dad, and there was a talk about whether potentially a loan deal would be more beneficial for him, and I asked him to trust me. He didn't. Neither of them obviously had known me long enough to know whether they could trust me, but one of my USPs over the last 17 years has been working with young players, bringing players through the academy system, blooding them and giving them opportunities to play in the first team, not just a game here or there, but then go and forge careers and play hundreds of games. And I've done that over the years with 80 odd players, and I've tried to explain to Josh that we know the right way to go about doing it. We feel there's a pathway of setting players up to be successful rather than setting players up to fail once they get into the first team. So I explained to him I'd select his games carefully in the first sort of half of the season, get him around double figures, and then once he has the confidence in himself that he can play at this level, by playing in games and holding his own, and then starting to implement himself onto the game and impact games of football, then we would then be able to utilise him after the split in all the games. And it's gone according to plan, but it's gone according to plan because Josh has listened, because he's worked hard and because he's tried to improve. So in my opinion, Josh Williams will play in the Football League. There's no doubt about that. He's good enough to play in the Football League probably now, but he probably needs a little bit longer with us, and we hope that he is successful with us over the next year or two. And then I firmly think at some point he'll move on into the Football League because he has all the attributes to do so. But for an 18-year-old player, and he still is 18, can't lose sight of that, to have played 28 out of 40 games for us this season and make his debut for Wales C shows the great strides that he's made, and it's because he's a level-headed, good young person who really wants to be as good as he can be. So it's a joy to work with players like that and coach players like that, because you can maximise their ability and their talents.
Touching on the Player of the Season awards, obviously it was for your own Player of the Season. You chose Ben Nash, probably alongside John Disney and Andy Firth, the other two award winners, were probably two or three of the most consistent players this season. Just how impressive has Ben and the other two been, and what do you see in their futures next season?
Well, if you take Ben really in isolation initially, he's been a revelation. I honestly think he's been a revelation. I don't think that people quite understood the standard that Ben would get to. Obviously, I'm really fortunate myself because I started working with Nashi 2.5, 3 years ago at Flint. He was already there when I walked into the group. And within the first couple of weeks I identified that there was going to be a top, in my opinion, a top 3 Welsh Premier League centre-back in him, but there was areas that he needed to improve in his game. We had honest conversations around that. He probably didn't like me for the first couple of weeks and months because I took him in and out of the team at different points. I was pushing him to expand his game in other areas. But all credit to him because he got his head down, he worked really, really hard, and he improved considerably. And he was pivotal alongside Quay Edwards last season for me at Flint, and Dan Roberts, who's also joined the football club recently, in our defensive record at Flint the season before last now, sorry. And then coming into him, I knew what he was capable of this season, but it was the confidence about which he's gone about his work. And I think that, look, we've had the best centre-back in possibly Welsh Premier League history in George Horan over a number of years. And I think because Ben's come through the academy at Connah and then forged his own path from 17, playing lots of men's football, it's always been aimed at him going to be the next George Horan. Well, I don't know if there is another George Horan. I think George is, unique in what he does, but he can go and be the best Ben Nash he can be. And that's what he's certainly done, and that I think he can continue to go and be the best Ben Nash he can be, and I think he can go and forge a very good career for himself at this level. He's still only 25, but he's played a number of games, so he's had an excellent season. John Disney obviously has been Mr. Consistent and been fantastic in terms of trying to implement different style that I've want from us in possession. And Andy Firth's been a revelation as well coming in, because the big shoes to fill in terms of Ollie Byrne last season and where he's gone on to play. But Firth, he's been excellent and pushed by John Rushton behind him. We've got and Joe Lawler with obviously the excellent Neil Ebrell, and it's no coincidence that we have a lot of good goalkeepers at Connah Nomads, because they come to work with Neil, they work with Neil, and then they get to the levels that they get to because of that. So Firth, he's done really well, but I'm not big on singling out individuals because I think that you never get anywhere without the team pulling all in the right direction. And culture of our football club and culture of our group that we're trying to create is getting better. It's got work to go. I think we can get better, in terms of our togetherness, and that'll come more we play together and work together and achieve things together. That comes in time, but in terms of the group, some standout performers, but also we've got over the line because of the strength of the overall quality of the group and how hard they've worked this season, and pushed by the staff behind it.
Looking ahead, obviously, not your first European campaign with the club, having been here as assistant previously, as we played Shakhtar Soligorsk in Belarus. But first time as manager, just how big of a challenge do you see that ahead of yourself?
Oh, it's a huge challenge. It's exciting, Nick. It's one that I'm looking forward to enormously, really relishing it. Hard work's already started, in terms of planning and putting the squad together. Travelling all over the northwest and North Wales in the last week, doing 14, 15-hour days, talking to players about the season they've had so far, talking to players about next season, and talking to potential new signings. So the work keeps going, but I'm relishing the opportunity. Obviously, I'm fortunate. It's not the first time I've managed in Europe because of my time, obviously, with Prestatyn, and obviously fortunate enough that in the time with Prestatyn we managed to progress through a round in Europe, and obviously had lots of experiences there playing against Rijeka and in front of 10,000 and all the different permutations that come with that. So I've got the experience from that. I've got the experience of working here, in a European campaign as part of the staff. So we won't be found wanting from that point of view. But as soon as that draw comes out and we look at who we've got, then the hard work really kicks in. But whoever we get is going to be a tough task. So one that we're relishing and we're looking forward to. You
talk about the draw. You've had a quick look at a few of the qualified teams. Any dream trips in there for you?
No, there's no dream trips because probably we might be seeded, in the draw, depending on how it all sits. I try not to focus or look too much at it until we see the opponents we got in front of us, and more than likely, let's be honest about it, the team that we're going to be playing against is probably going to be of a superior nature to us in certain areas. So we have got to come up with game plans and focus on that club that we're going to face and that team we're going to face and what their challenges are. And I think that a little bit alike when we played in the top six, and we have to find a way of winning our heads-to-heads against teams that are in and around us who have capabilities that are better at some than what we're capable of doing. We have to find a way of winning games of football, and that finding a way is down to identifying the game plan. So something I'm really looking forward to doing is pitting our wits against a European opportunity and European opponent, and the opportunity that goes alongside that. So whoever we get, wherever it may be, hopefully one that hasn't got a 4 or 5 hour flight would be a little bit easier. But just relishing it and really excited about the challenge as the players are.
And finally, Neil, obviously in terms of next season, as a club we'll be heading to Flint, to the Essity Stadium, somewhere that you're very familiar with obviously. Just what do you think it's going to be like in terms of playing there, and potentially on a pitch that won't hamper the style of football that we've been trying to play over the last 18 months, 2 years?
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge, Nick. It's going to be a real challenge. I don't think you can quite quantify. I still speak to Andy Morrison all the time. He's a good, valued friend and a trusted confidant at times. And the football ground that we played at the Deeside Stadium, the record there's phenomenal. Under Andy's time, carried on last season through Craig and actually this season for us, to go unbeaten at home in all competitions all season. When you play TNS there 3 times is some feat and some achievements. So how do we move that form and those points across to a new ground which is completely different from a grass pitch to a 3G pitch? And I was looking at our figures, and I think that our points in the league this season, of which we picked up 61, I think 40 of them or 41 of them came on grass pitches and 20 came on 3G pitches. So there's something to learn there. But we do want to play in a style of play where we want to have more of the ball and we want to build up possession, and that certainly allows it to do it on Flint's 3G pitch, which is I'm led to believe state of the art. So we're looking forward to working on the pitch. We're looking forward to playing on there and evolving our style of play. But we have to find a way of making it home quickly, because our home form has been imperative to us, and we have to probably look at why we haven't, within our squad currently, why we haven't been as successful on 3G pitches as we have on grass pitches. And potentially that is something that's going to take a lot of hard work. And also our European challenge, we're going to be playing on 3G pitch in our home fixture in Europe, so the hard work has already started. It's something we've been aware of over the course of the season, and it's something that we've been trying to improve on, and I think we're getting there, because if you look at our last couple of prior to the TNS game, you look at our last couple of away results, I thought we were fantastic for 45 to 60 minutes against Cardiff Met away, where we beat them 2-0. I thought we were very good value for our 2-1 victory away against Bala on 3G pitch. So we can do it. We need to do it for longer periods, and we need to do it better, really. But that's where the hard work starts with us and our staff. And do you get time off? No, you don't. Our staff already having appointments and meetings and anything to try and prepare? Yes, we are. And I think that's where ultimately I've got to be really grateful that I've got a fantastic group of staff. And from Lee Jones, who came in as my assistant manager, who we've worked together for so long, we've got the trust that happens between myself and Lee. We've known each other from our playing days at Tranmere and worked at different clubs. John McCarthy's been fantastic as a first team coach. We're very lucky that the level of staff that we've got, obviously Jay is imperative to Connah Nomads being successful. Neil Gibson, as I've spoken about before, and Anthony Gomez as a performance analyst. There's no one better in the business, and I've worked in, had the luxury of working in full-time football as well at times, and we have a real good quality of staff, as well as Paloma and Kyle, the S&C coach, on the medical side of things. So we are very fortunate at this football club to try and prepare ourselves ready for each game, and our hard work is continuing now to make sure that pre-season is evolving us to play in a style of play with players fit enough to go and perform on a 3G pitch, because we're going to have to be, and it's a different style of play because the pitches are fast and you have to be technical and you have to be able to get around the pitch and you have to be mobile. So pre-season is going to be a little bit different for players, and we're going to have to try and embrace that challenge, and it's one we're really looking forward to.